It's a breaking news team. The Kansas City Chiefs re-sign Hollywood Brown after an interesting Saturday morning. Let's talk about it. KCSN Breaking News Team. I'm Tucker Franklin. That's Ken Swanson. That was the new Breaking News Team bumper, too. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Yeah, that's the first time that's debuted. That's great. I was in the shower 10 minutes ago when the Kansas City Chiefs signed Hollywood Brown to a one-year deal, re-signing him here. We can't ignore what happened on Saturday morning, and this news coming down as well with some more turbulence in the wide receiver room in the offseason. It wouldn't be a Chiefs offseason without some wide receiver turbulence. Kent, I want to get your reactions on that, but obviously Hollywood Brown coming back, one-year deal for him reportedly, $11 million per Adam Schefter. Thoughts on that move?
I think this is a move that we all anticipated would happen at some point here. Obviously the timing is unique where they're just getting this, ironed out a couple hours after some, big potential wide receiver news breaks. But I don't think that has all that much to do with the fact that Hollywood Brown is back in Kansas City. I think he was always kind of in the mix. And, it sounded like Brett Veach, even at the press conference that he had at the NFL Combine, seemed to indicate that, Hollywood Brown was somebody of interest for the Chiefs to bring back, and did some good things down the stretch and earned another contract in Kansas City. And I think it's well, it makes sense for both sides. I'm glad to see that Hollywood Brown is back here in Kansas City.
Yeah, I do think that, as you mentioned, this was something that I think a lot of people kind of anticipated, especially with him having the injury and not playing a full year. A lot of people kind of anticipated, okay, last year Hollywood Brown's going to sign. It's a prove-it deal. He's going to show what he can do and then maybe go get some money elsewhere. That didn't happen. He got hurt. He didn't prove it. And so now this is like another prove-it deal, I guess. Another guy who always brings it and who always proves it, Matthew Lane, joining us here now on the Breaking News Team show. I'm not messing around, Matty. We're getting after it here today on a Saturday, just like the Chiefs are. Chiefs getting after it on a Saturday. Thoughts, immediate instant reactions to the Chiefs re-signing Hollywood Brown to a one-year, $11 million deal.
Got to move that news cycle along. Yeah, it's a good. Listen, they got the signing in. Timing is intriguing. We can discuss that at a later date. Once I'm out of here, I'll let you guys deal with that one. But the Hollywood Brown coming back makes a ton of sense for the Chiefs. I mean, I think regardless of anything going on with this wide receiver room, right? They clearly were thin at the position. Here's a player that they had a lot of high hopes for, and we all did just last year. And then an injury takes most of the year away from him. So it just made a ton of sense for him to come back this year. It seems, without knowing the full details, the contract looks like it's probably roughly in line with what he got last year with incentives. I wouldn't imagine the guarantees are a lot higher, if at all, than what it would have been last year. So it just kind of checks the boxes, right? You start looking around, this is checking a lot of the boxes for a move that makes a ton of sense for the Chiefs going into the season.
Well, and I want to talk about the contract a little bit here. So, this is the second one-year prove-it deal for Hollywood Brown over the last, couple years here in Kansas City. And there are some, I think it's probably worth educating a little bit on the up to $11 million part of this. So because Hollywood Brown barely played in the season, there are some maneuvers that the Chiefs can use with the contract to help kind of spread the cap hit over two seasons, essentially. So, and it's probably good to give the crash course on not likely to be earned incentives, because you're probably going to be hearing about not likely to be earned incentives in this contract that you're getting for Hollywood Brown. So when you are negotiating one-year deals like this, there are mechanisms that you can use to, if an incentive that you include in a one-year deal is not likely to be earned, meaning, based on the performance of the year prior, it didn't happen. You can move that cap space into next season. So when it comes to Hollywood Brown's situation, he played 3 regular season games. If you put an incentive based on playing time, and it's more than 4 games. It's 4 and then 8 and then 12 or whatever you want to call it. And you're paying on just games played simply. All that money from all those not likely to be earned incentives starting at game 4 can be moved into your cap hits for 2026. So it's a mechanism that helps allow the Chiefs to spread a cap hit for a contract and for some of these incentives off into future years. Because of Hollywood Brown, and like you could see this with Charles Omenihu, you could see this with DJ Humphries too coming up if they do decide to bring some of these players back because of things like games played being so low. It allows you to spread out the cap hits for these guys if you want to try to bring them back and keep the cap hits for 2025 lower. So that is very likely what just happened with Hollywood Brown. I do not anticipate that the $11 million cap hit is going to count against the 2025 cap. It's going to be a small portion of that cap counting in 2025 and then allowing the Chiefs based on just simple playing time, probably 4 games. We're going to give you $1 million, 8 games. We're going to give you another $1 million, 12 games. We're going to give you another $1 million. Just doing that helps spread that cap hit. And that's probably what you're going to be seeing here when details of this contract are announced. In fact, I'll bet on it. I will say there will be not likely to be earned incentives in this contract when it's announced.
For sure. I mean, and even if it was just straight up an $11 million contract, like I think you start to wait and see what wide receivers are about to go for this year, I don't think that would be that out of pocket anyway. So like, I think it's going to be an even better deal for the Chiefs if there is incentives based, because that means the performance has to match for them to pay up to that amount. But just straight up $11 million for what Hollywood Brown can be is something that I think is very worthwhile. Now, that kind of takes me to like my next side of it. I hope the Chiefs use him better than they did this past year. I understand the injury and coming back middle of the year probably throws a wrinkle into things, but even after having time off in preparation for the playoff run and then the Super Bowl, they really used Hollywood Brown as like this motion kind of gimmick player where they had to protect him almost all the time. It felt like they were trying to protect him as much as possible and not really giving him a ton of those isolated or backside or just like, real wide receiver roles. And that's what this team has been missing. And not that Hollywood Brown is great at those particular things, not that that's been his calling card in the NFL, but he has been a functioning real NFL wide receiver for multiple other teams. And it was a little disappointing to not even see the Chiefs try to dive into that type of role for him. So bringing him back, hopefully that means it's the case, because if you do have Rashee Rice, or when you do have Rashee Rice, and when you do have Xavier Worthy all playing at the same time, neither one of those guys are lined up on the outside and run any route we give you. Everybody kind of needs a little bit of hand-holding to get into the best position before the play starts. And if you're having to do that with Hollywood Brown as well, that's kind of getting a little dicey. That's starting to make it a little bit trickier to get all the play calls and make sure that everybody's being used every play. So let's just see his role expand next year with a hopefully healthy offseason and lead up to the regular season that we didn't get this past year.
Yep, Kansas City Chiefs re-signed Hollywood Brown, 1-year contract up to $11 million. The base salary is going to be interesting, as you mentioned, that we get to see here, because the Chiefs are going to need to still do some cap maneuvering things, I believe, to do a bunch of stuff that they want to do. Obviously, this is going to be a cap maneuvering deal as well as they kind of load this here. There are still some free agent spots that the Chiefs are going to have to look at and kind of focus on here a little bit too. Actually, Matt Verderham and I went position by position on that football show that literally came out this morning, so that's awesome. We went position by position, kind of going through every single player that the Chiefs have on the roster and who the potential free agents are, and we just kind of broke down each position that the Chiefs have and kind of what the situation is there. This adds another body to a wide receiver room that was very slim pickings. It was Sky Moore, Xavier Worthy, which talk about that later when a certain Chiefs podcaster and lawyer comes on, he can talk about that one. And Rashee Rice, another interesting case. And then you're looking at now Hollywood Brown kind of being your wide receiver 1 possibly at the start of the year. They needed to do some stuff there. Nico Remigio also on the roster as well, but he's shown to be a return specialist. They needed to add bodies to this wide receiver room desperately. So this is a move, as we already mentioned, that was kind of anticipated, but needed to happen.
So thin from a depth perspective, I think, right? Because they don't have a ton of bodies on the roster. And with the Xavier Worthy news, we don't know what that situation is going to look like. We don't know the timeline for that. We don't know if there's going to be any ramifications necessarily yet of this. But I will say, one thing that we don't really have a perspective on, and I think one thing that is probably appreciated about what the Chiefs just did this season, going 15-1 with their starters, and Maddie playing left tackle, is that this team really had to adjust on the fly with the vision for their offense, because they had a vision for Rashee Rice, and Rashee Rice was going to be a 1,000-yard receiver in Kansas City in 2025 or 2024. He was going to be the focal point of this offense, and they were going to funnel a lot of targets through him. And then he goes down, early in the season. Oh, and by the way, before that, Hollywood Brown has the sternoclavicular injury that keeps him from even being on the field for the start of the season. The vision for this team was so much different than what ultimately it came about, right? And we'll see what happens with Worthy, but we still haven't got to see those three on the field together with Travis Kelce in an offense. And I think the Chiefs, if they're going to have all three there and available for them at any point in the season, I think we were robbed of the opportunity to see what the Chiefs had cooking with regard to that. And now we'll see what the situation arises for everyone, right? There's still some, Rice's injury and, some of the suspension stuff that sits out there. And then now with some news with Worthy, who knows what comes from that. But, we were robbed of the opportunity to see what this offense was planning on all offseason, on all summer. And we'll finally get a chance at some point, I would imagine, with all three of those receivers under contract in Kansas City for 2025.
So I'm about to hot tag out of here. So just, we have my last little bit off. I got some stuff to do. Here, but I'm about ready to be out. So I'm with Kit. Like, we were robbed a little bit of getting to see what the vision for this offense was going to be. And I think in part that helped raise the expectations and hopes for Xavier Worthy, because he was thrust into different roles, and it took him a while, but as the year went on, he really did find his footing down the home stretch. So you feel really good about him. And Rashee Rice, if he can come back and be healthy going into the next season and is available, like I said earlier, I want to see Hollywood Brown take on a different role than what he had last year. If it's the same role, this move doesn't excite me a whole lot, just because I don't think there's a lot of ceiling there. I don't think that adds any. The Rashee Rice plus Worthy plus the version of Brown we saw last year doesn't excite me very much. That's just three guys doing a lot of the same stuff. If you get the version of Hollywood Brown that played in Arizona a couple years back, or even in Baltimore, where he was this zone beating intermediate threat that was really good on in breaking routes, working back towards the middle of the field, that's a lot more exciting. So I just want to see that guy come back, and then this move makes a ton of sense. So on that note, I appreciate you guys for letting me hop on here with the breaking news team. I am out. I got things to go do. The weather's beautiful out here. I got to get away from the old Chiefs interwebs for a minute. Yeah, but in my place, you guys are improving. So enjoy the rest of the show, fellas.
There it is. Well, Maddie with the tease of the century. Seth Kaiser joining us now on the breaking news team. Seth, how are things going, buddy? How are ya?
Well, first let's test my mic.
It's great. You sound awesome. Yes.
Hey.
That's where you should have thrown the break, though, Tucker.
Oh, yeah. Seth, how you doing? Look, I just wanted to publish If I Were Brett Veach Part 3. Instead, what I've done most of my morning is argue with people about how the legal system works.
Yeah.
Isn't that Tuesday for you?
I was gonna say, if I had a dime for every time I heard that from you, Seth.
if I actually had forgotten. Look, where would you like me to start?
Sorry, before you start, I just saw Dwayne Bowe tweeted, just got the call at Chiefs. And I think that's a good
they're
spot.
going to bring Juju back, so you might as well just,
They're probably the same age. That's a good spot to take a break. We're going to take a break. We'll be back right after this.
Shop Chiefs tickets and more with no fees. Plus, save big with code KCSN at ticketsforless.com, the official ticket provider of KC Sports Network.
Success in real estate takes more than vision. It takes the right financial partner. When someone takes something rundown and turns it into something great, that's called a comeback story. Like Bryan Group. They take distressed properties here in KC, completely rework them, and then turn them into valuable real estate. But that kind of work needs the right bank behind it. Enter Emprise Bank. They're not about cookie-cutter loans. They saw Bryan Group's vision, backed them, and now they're making big moves in Kansas City real estate. Talk about your partner in possible. Emprise doesn't do one-size-fits-all financing. They invest in potential and back growth. Visit emprisebank.com/KC to learn more. Emprise Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
Breaking news team here. Tucker Franklin, Kent Swanson, Seth Kaiser breaking down the Kansas City Chiefs re-signing Hollywood Brown to a one-year deal worth up to $11 million as per Adam Schefter. Seth.
Oh, is that what I'm breaking down?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Seth, hang on. What do you think we were breaking down?
You know what? It's hard to say.
All right. You know what? I'm going to let you cook, Seth. We'll let you cook.
That's great. I'll go work on the draft guide for a few minutes.
Yeah, go work on the draft guide. I'll scroll Twitter. Matt Verderam just texted me, said he wants in, so I'll go ahead and let you cook on the legal ramifications. Obviously, everything that happened with Xavier Worthy this morning. Seth, you are the only qualified person on the network to talk about this, because if I try to talk about it, I'd say something dumb and that isn't right. So I need you to talk about this from the law side of things. Xavier Worthy, this circumstance obviously happened this morning that led to 2 hours later. I think that we already talked about this. I think the deal was probably going to get done regardless, but 2 hours later, you see the re-signing of Hollywood Brown. Seth, your thoughts?
All right. Caveat. Nothing I'm about to say should be construed as legal advice. I'm an employee of the government. I'm a prosecuting attorney. I've been a prosecuting attorney for 5 years. For several years before that, I did defense work. For several years before that, I did prosecuting attorney stuff. I've prosecuted literally hundreds, if not thousands, of domestic assault cases. I've worked with law enforcement throughout all of that. What I'm saying to anyone listening to this or watching this, I guess, right now is respectfully, depending on who you are, I know more than you do. Okay. Sorry. That's just, I have to get that off my system. I'm sure you have a friend who's in law enforcement. I'm sure you've got someone who was charged falsely with a crime a couple times. Maybe you got caught up in a bad situation. Maybe you've got a buddy who's a lawyer. I'm sorry. I know more than you do. I can't. It's early. Well, early-ish. It's 12:38. My household's been sick this week. I can't do the thing where I'm going to pretend that people who have no idea what they're talking about have any idea what they're talking about. What I'm also going to do is tell you that when it comes to specific individualized criminal cases or potential criminal cases, even someone who's been prosecuting for as long as I have does not know what's happened. It depends is the most common answer you hear in the legal field. And anyone who tells you otherwise is lying to you. It just depends. Every situation is wildly different. If you were to ask me, like, one thing I've got people asking me today is like, and I don't know why, but this has been like the particular thing. Well, Seth, they wouldn't have arrested Xavier Worthy unless they had significant physical evidence. Sure, they would. The standard for an arrest is the same standard for criminal charging, which is called probable cause. Probable cause, it's been found by pretty much every state court, as well as the U.S. Supreme Court. Probable cause can exist at the word of one witness and or victim. Probable cause is a much lower standard than beyond a reasonable doubt, which is what is required to convict people. People are convicted of crimes after trials all the time because of the word of one witness. That is, and I apologize in advance, I guess trigger warning for some people, that is basically the only way you mostly get convictions in criminal sexual assault cases, because there's almost never anything except the word of one person. But Seth, what about DNA? Almost never there. Okay. That's CSI, that stuff. That's just not how it works. That's why those convictions are so hard to get, that and the delayed reporting that generally comes with them, which is also often true in domestic cases. So here's the deal. Yes, they could have arrested him with just the word of one person. That's just how it works sometimes, because domestic violence is a crime that occurs in the privacy of the home. And if the only time officers arrested was because you know, they had scads of evidence. Well, it's on video. There's 8 witnesses. That's not how this works. Now, does that mean they always arrest based on the word of one alleged victim or witness? Of course not. It depends. And that's like the big thing. It depends. Everything's circumstantial. You don't know, and I don't know. But what I do know is what could have happened. So now we've got the statement of his attorneys, which are basically, the long and short of it is, they're making claims that there was a discovery of infidelity on the part of the alleged victim, that she refused to vacate and made a number of extortive efforts prior to resorting to this baseless accusation against Mr. Worthy. Here's what I will say, generally speaking, not literally every time, but the vast majority of the time, if you have a situation, or you know what, I'll step back. Seth, have you ever seen a case like that where someone threatened to extort someone and refused to vacate a premises and then eventually falsely accused them of a crime? Yeah, probably about 5 to 10 times throughout my career, give or take. It happens, particularly when you involve things with money. Do not misquote me on that and say that I'm saying that's what happened here or that it's likely. I don't know. Has it happened? Yes. Is it possible? Yes. Is it likely, though not certain, that there would be some sort of corroborating evidence of that? Prior text messages exchanged between the alleged victim and Worthy, conversations that he would have had with friends, family members that, hey, I found this out. Now she's saying this. What do I do? Which, by the way, what you do when you're trying to tell someone to leave your house and they won't leave your house, you call law enforcement and you get yourself out of there, because if someone's saying they're going to say something false about you, you get yourself out of the situation. That's a possibility. Sure. Possibility. Generally speaking, there's going to be corroborating evidence of it. Well, Seth, his attorney said that it's baseless accusations. This is what happens. They must have that evidence, right? Because they said that. No, absolutely not. Attorneys are advocates. Their job is to take what he is saying to them right now, whether they've got corroborating evidence or not, and put it out there. Do they need to do it publicly? Kind of in a case of someone who's famous, a little bit, yeah, because you've got the court of public opinion to worry about and in the shield to worry about, as well as law enforcement. Generally speaking, you wouldn't see this in a case. So if that's what happened, there should be some form of corroborating evidence for it. It's essentially it's a version of what we would call an affirmative defense. It's not quite an affirmative defense. Affirmative defense is self-defense, right? So that's me saying, I stabbed Kent. Okay. Sorry, Kent. Dang. and a not guilty is, no, I didn't. I did not do that. An affirmative defense is, well, Kent attacked me with a giant shovel because he's obsessed with Home Alone after working with Craig for so many years. And so I'm sorry, I'm trying to lighten it up for a minute because I know I'm doing a lot right now. That's an affirmative defense. What they're claiming here, it's a version of a not guilty thing, but it's also hey, they're trying to extort me and I can prove it. Okay. Do I have any idea what's true and what's not? Absolutely not. Neither do you. But for one, don't be online telling people that law enforcement can't arrest someone based on the statement of one victim without corroborating evidence. That's not true. You are actively telling people things about the criminal justice system that are not true. Don't do that. If you are not a prosecuting attorney or you're not in law enforcement, shh, you don't know. Now, to be fair, that's what a lot of football players might say about me. So there you go. And that's fair. But there's a lot of options here. We have no idea what's going to happen. The only thing I would add, a lot of people have asked about the charge. Every state has some iteration of this kind of charge. People hear domestic assault and assume significant other. Now, I think based on the statement of his attorneys, we can skip a lot there because that's clearly an allegation of quote unquote infidelity. You can piece 2 and 2 together there. I would note domestic charges can be against anyone who lives in your household, any blood family member, someone who used to live with you but no longer does, someone with whom you share a child, someone who you have a romantic relationship with. The case here, it appears it's an allegation of some form of assault against a significant other. The talk about I can't remember the phrasing that they use. What the phrasing that they use, we call in Minnesota domestic assault by strangulation. So what that means is it's not people just think choking automatically. That's not necessarily all it means. It also means any restriction of airflow. So if that comes, the way you see it, it's about 50-50. You'll see it either with choking in some form or someone putting a hand over mouth and nose that restricts breathing. The reason that in pretty much every state, that is upcharged from a misdemeanor to a felony. The reason being there's a lot of data over the course of, dozens and dozens of years in the criminal justice system that step in an alleged assault is a significant step towards death and creates a significantly higher likelihood that significant harm will occur in the near future. The basic premise is based on the data that we have available, and which isn't perfect. The criminal justice system is not perfect. Based on the best data we have available, the first time someone does something, they're not choking someone. That's generally speaking what we know based on available data. We also know that that's a significant step towards doing something that causes great bodily harm or death. So that's why strangulation is an automatic, whether it's your first time or whatever else you did, it's an automatic felony charge in basically every state. So one final thing. Well, when will we learn more? This is actually pretty simple. Depending on the county he's in, I'm told it's a county that prosecutes pretty heavily. I don't know anything about that county. Every state is different with how they do things. I can tell you how it would work in my state or my county, okay? Someone's taken into custody over the weekend. They're placed under arrest. What ends up happening is, generally speaking, in order to hold someone for longer than 36 hours, at least in the state of Minnesota, you need essentially a probable cause statement to be signed off on by the prosecuting attorney as well as a judge. So what happens is every Saturday, I get a phone call and I get something, a PC statement, a probable cause statement, read to me by a jailer who says, on such and such date, I, deputy such and such, was dispatched to this address. This is what was reported. This is what I did. And if it contains probable cause, again, a much lower standard than beyond a reasonable doubt, then I will sign off on it. And I will either ask for them to set a certain bail amount or I ask them to be held for court on Monday. In the case of domestics, it's always hold for court. You always sit the whole weekend. Is that the case in this county? I don't know. My assumption would be if the prosecuting attorney looks at it and believes that there's probable cause, he or she will ask that he be held until Monday, in which case a criminal complaint will be drafted and that will be public record. If he's released without charges being filed, then what happens is law enforcement reports become investigative data, which is in every state non-public, okay? And there's reasons for that, right? We don't want people just being under investigation and victims and stuff. We want that information to be private while we try to figure out what happened. And then it becomes what's called an under review. I have multiple under reviews sitting on my desk. Some of them are a year old, unfortunately. And that's kind of, they kind of get sifted to the bottom of the pile sometimes. We talked about this with the Rashee Rice case, who still, as far as I can tell, has been booked on criminal charges, but not actually charged. But that's a story for another day. So if he's charged, though, criminal complaints, public documents, very easy to obtain. And if he's charged, you're also going to have a prosecuting office that's going to be probably more willing to talk about it. You're going to probably have the names of the officers involved. You're probably, depending on the state, if this is an adult alleged victim, which it sounds like, you might have the name of the person in the probable cause statement because it's not a requirement to just use initials like it might be with a juvenile. So here's the main reason I'm going through all that. I see the quotes that are coming out. We're aware of the situation and we're making inquiries or whatever. Chiefs, if this gets charged out, it's real easy for you to make inquiries. You send someone down there and you send them to the courthouse and they take 20 minutes in person. You don't call, you go, because you can obtain the complaint, maybe attach law enforcement reports. That varies on jurisdiction. We don't do that. Some jurisdictions do. So you'll have the law enforcement report attached to the criminal complaint. And that'll give you the officers' names, the allegations. It'll give you the information you need to follow up with people and actually conduct an independent investigation. And you could actually do it rather than just saying you're doing something and waiting for everyone else to do it. So I think I covered a lot. I basically just talked for 15 minutes straight. I'm deeply annoyed today. We'll see how things end up. But with the Worthy stuff, the short story is, we don't know anything with certainty. What I can tell you is that's a very specific charge. It's also very hard to prove, to be perfectly honest, because people think that there's going to be physical evidence of choking, but honestly, unless you get like significant petechia, which is redness in the eyes, and certain other things, it's hard to prove that exact thing happened, that airflow is restricted, that someone lost consciousness. It's one of the charges that we very commonly have to plea down because it's tough to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. I have no idea what he did. I have no idea what the background is. The legal process will play itself out. But I do know if it gets charged, the Chiefs have the ability to gain as much information as they need to move forward. I know that. And so that's what I know about the Xavier Worthy situation. I almost said Rashee Rice situation. I am so tired of me knowing the things that I know mattering for this job. I'm so annoyed by it. It's so ridiculous. It's just like, why is this every offseason? Like the fact that I know about criminal law and child protection law has been wildly relevant in the last decade. And I'm just sick about the whole thing. So that's what I know. And telling Chiefs fans, look, one way or another, don't assume one way or another. Just because his attorneys are saying one thing's true doesn't make it true. They ought to be able to provide corroborating evidence. Just because someone alleged someone committed a crime doesn't mean they necessarily did. Well, Seth, I read online that false reporting of domestic violence is extremely rare. It can be, yes, but it does happen. That's why there's a system in place, and that's why stuff has to play itself out. That said, the Chiefs are not the criminal justice system. True. And from my perspective, I'm going to actually keep that in the chamber. But if they have the ability, and this is actually where I have got a weird amount of annoyance. They have the ability to conduct an independent investigation. An intern could travel to that courthouse if he's charged and gather as much information as they need to conduct a more thorough investigation, to take statements from parties involved. You can talk to his attorneys. You can figure this out within a month, what you really think, if it's charged publicly, if not a much shorter period of time. I think I covered everything. Oh, hey,
Hollywood Brown has re-signed with the Kansas City Chiefs for 1 year, $11 million.
You should enter my field because your coping mechanism of humor is just spot on. That is exactly how you deal with it. Yes, Brown is back. I agree with everything I heard Maddie Lane say. I want to see them. Smart guy. It was mystifying to me with Brown, and I've talked so much, so I'm just going to say like one thing. It was mystifying to me how Brown gets healthy. They have him on a snap count, but he has really high usage rates, right? He's targeted a ton in his limited snap count. Then the playoffs start and he just vanishes. I'm thinking that had more to do with the left side of the offensive line and the matchups that they had there. Although the left side held up okay, but that in the AFC Championship, but that was more a play calling thing. They got the ball out in like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
I would like to see much more of intermediate threat coupled with the threat of his deep speed Hollywood Brown, not being used like he's Rashee Rice light.
We do have another member of the Breaking News team hopping on here, Matt Verderam. Matt, thank you for hopping on the Breaking News team. I guess I should just ask you, Matt, where do you want to start with this?
I feel like I just went to law school. I don't even know what else to say. I think Seth talked for 14 straight minutes about the law, and honestly, I'm impressed by it. It's
very impressive, yeah.
There's nothing in the world I could talk about for 14 straight minutes. Look, so the Chiefs brought in Hollywood, and I'm curious what his cap hit's going to be because, you know, when you hear that, like, oh, it's 1 in 11, but then you actually read the reports and it's up to could be doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Yes.
Because for anyone who's unaware of this, like, the incentives can be 2 different types of things, not likely to be earned and likely to be earned. And when they're likely to be earned, they're on the cap hit. Not likely to be earned, not on the cap hit. And that is defined by if the guy did him the year prior. Unless they're asking Hollywood Brown to take an incentive where he has over 100 yards receiving, they're all going to be not likely to be earned. 100%. So those, if he does hit them, then those go into the next year's cap hit and whatnot, so on and so forth. That being said, like if this ends up being like a $7 million cap hit, to me, that's fine. I mean, Tutu Atwell just got paid 1 year and $10 million, and Tutu Atwell is not Hollywood Brown. So if you're the Chiefs, I wonder how much of that was like, hey, we like to sign Hollywood. And then they got the news this morning that Seth just gave a dissertation on. And then they're like, you know what? Probably ought to speed that process up. Maybe tack on a few more incentives. Look, I think it's paramount now because we have no idea who the hell is going to be available to them week 1, right? Like we don't know with Worthy, as Seth went over. Rashee Rice, God only knows if he's going to be there week 1, right? I mean, he may be there week 1, he may be there week 9. Like who knows? Plus, he's coming off the knee injury, so I still think they have to add another receiver, like a meaningful one. Not,
I think it'd be good to just you're talking here. There's the question like, hey, did the unnamed events make it more likely that Juju Smith-Schuster or D-Hop also returns? That's from Primetime Rambo. That's a super chat, by the way. The super chats go to the KCSN Foundation, so thank you for supporting that. And any super chats here and after also go to the KCSN Foundation. But I mean, Matt V, that's kind of, it's the same vein, right? Like maybe you're seeing, some of the names from last year back into the mix, just at least so they can tread water to start the season.
I almost feel like they got to go get somebody else though. Like that's just my 2 cents. Like DeAndre Hopkins, Juju, they're 1,000 years old. I mean, there are people with AARP cards who at this point run faster. They need more explosiveness. And that's, look, I don't know that they'll go out and, I'm not saying that this is going to make them go out and trade for DK Metcalf. Like if they're going to do that, it's not going to have anything to do with what happened this morning.
But what if they did? But what if they did?
Then that's a really bad process. If their entire roster construction changed based on what happened this morning, then that's a terrible job by their front office.
I meant what if they did trade for DK Metcalf, not if what if this
listen, I'm all for them. I would offer, if I were the Chiefs, I would offer either my second or Tennessee's third. Not both, by the way, like one of them. You want one of them? Here you go. Now, look, I know it's out there. It was reported by The Athletic that the Seahawks want a first and a third. Yes, and I would like $5 million for my Jeep. And I'm not going to get that. And Seattle's not getting a first and a third round pick for a guy who's going to be extended starting when he's 29 years old for $30 million a year, or at least it's what he'd like. If I'm the Chiefs, listen, I think DK Metcalf would fit incredibly with them because you've got Worthy, who's this big burner, and you've got Rice, who's this, this slot receiver inside, and Metcalf can kind of do all those things. So you have a perfect fit. Plus, he's enormous. Just a big-bodied receiver in a way that they haven't had in the years that Mahomes has been there. But no, I still think you need to add another meaningful receiver. I'm not saying they've got to go out and get a guy like Metcalf. That'd be amazing. They've got to go get somebody who can play like real snaps. And to me, that's not Juju, and it's not Justin Watson. It's like they got to go get somebody. Is it Darius Slayton? I don't know. Maybe. Because Brown's only signed for 1 year. It's not like they signed him for 3 years. So I feel like, or do you feel like, hey, maybe you get Luther Bird at 31? I don't know. That's a risk, obviously. You're hoping on something like that. But I still think they need another weapon because I don't think you can play Kelsey 85% of the snaps again. You just can't do that. So they've got to figure out a way to distribute these targets better. And you might have, depending on how this all shakes out, you might have your 2 best receivers unavailable to you to start the season. So you've got to kind of fortify yourself against that.
And I do think it'll be fascinating to see if they go and add, like you said, like go add a more significant asset into the room, whether it's, probably in this scenario, it probably doesn't make sense for it to be another rookie.
Right.
It probably needs to be a veteran. I wonder, and I think what will be fascinating to see is if it's they know both of these guys, there's a chance both of these guys miss some time to start the 2025 season. If that's the case, you could probably make the case and then make the argument for the tread water approach, right? Which is, hey, we've got Kelsey, we're going to bring back Juju, we're going to have Hollywood Brown on the field, and then whatever we get out of Xavier or Rashee at the beginning of the year, if we get him at all, great. But Justin Watson, and you just kind of tread water. You try to tread water until you start getting those guys back, and you just acknowledge like the first month's gonna suck, but at least we're gonna know the first month's gonna suck, and we can plan for the first month to suck. That could be a consideration as they're kind of going through some of this stuff. Like, I don't know, and there's no good answer. I think things just got a little bit more complicated for the entirety of the offseason and the roster construction, the roster decisions that they have to make. I do agree with you. Like, I would like to see more juice in that room. I'm just wondering how they navigate the first 4 to 6 to 8 games of the season.
I mean, does Mahomes actually have a negative ADOT next year? If Bryce Worthy is suspended, like is there a world where every pass is behind the line of scrimmage as if there's like a force field at the line? Because
they showed proof of concept, at least until they ran into a freaking buzzsaw with Philly. So
I mean, apparently, because he was 41st out of 43 qualifying quarterbacks last year. The only two guys who had a higher ADOT than were Minshew and Tua. So is it possible this year that he has a lower ADOT than like a running back? Because that might be where this thing's headed if Worthy and Rice are unavailable.
Well, to be fair, Ben Johnson's now a head coach in Chicago, so there might be running backs with some pretty high ADOTs.
I am prepared if those two guys are unavailable for just 80 swing passes to 94-year-old Kareem Hunt. And it's just like, what do you think? Can we pick up 5? It's right. They've got to get some explosiveness, man. If they're going to be missing 1 or 2 of those guys, like, they got to run. I mean, I can't remember watching a slower offense on tape than them at times last year. I mean, just when Worthy wasn't on the field, they couldn't run. Yeah. I mean, literally nobody could run on that team. And it's just tough. It's tough. I'm saying a very obvious thing, but it's tough to get separation when nobody can run. And nobody, and you know, I get it. Like, people want Mahomes' ADOT to go up. I asked Veach about that at the combine, but like, what is he supposed to do? Like, there's nowhere to go with the football other than Kelsey, who's 5 yards in front of him every play. So
gotta be able to protect too, to throw down the field if you want, you know,
with consistency. Yep. Otherwise you're limited to design shot plays, or not blind throws, but spot throws, you know, where because you see people take deep shots, you know, 1, 2, 3, go, but those are spot throws. They're a little riskier. They're a little more, you just don't know. Right.
You're trying to beat a cover 2 safety, and it's 1, 2, 3 hitch down the sideline, and you're driving the ball. I mean,
and that's limited. That's where you can't have a consistent, and that's where people need to understand. It's not about being able to throw deep once or twice. They can design that, you know, they'll have the rollouts where the tight ends are coming from unexpected places. That's been a favorite of theirs. But to be able to do it 10 times a game, you got to have speed, and you got to be able to at least somewhat protect. Tucker, I don't know if you want to. We've got an updated statement from Worthy's attorneys.
We did get an updated statement. I'll read it for you.
Ooh, thank you.
Yes, I'm pulling it up right now on my other screen here. Also, by the way, his attorney's racking up some billable hours. Shout out to his attorney.
No, they've got a private and for what it's worth, there's some things that I think are interesting about this statement that show they've already been racking up some billable hours.
This is from Chip Lewis and Sam Bassett, a statement on behalf of Xavier Worthy. They say, quote, "We are aware of the allegation that led to Mr. Worthy's arrest. We are working with law enforcement in Williamson County to ensure that they have the benefit of the totality of circumstances that led to this allegation. The complainant was asked multiple times over the past 2 weeks to vacate Mr. Worthy's residence upon discovery of her infidelity, which a private investigator has video evidence of. Ooh. She has refused to vacate the residence and made a number of extortive efforts prior to resorting to this baseless allegation against Mr. Worthy. The complainant further destroyed a room in the residence, scratched Mr. Worthy's face, and ripped out parts of his hair, which there is photographic evidence of. Mr. Worthy told law enforcement at the time of the incident that he did not want to press charges against the complainant. We will continue to cooperate with Williamson County authorities as we will have full faith in their thorough investigation and will support Mr. Worthy's innocence." Chip Lewis, Sam Bassett. Some very interesting claims there. Seth, as you mentioned, obviously these attorneys are advocates for their client.
Yep.
There are obviously two sides to a story, but some very interesting information arising from the statement. Thoughts on it?
Right. The first thing would be one of the things that I talked about is if this is if what they're trying to claim is remotely accurate, there should be something corroborating. That's what they're already trying to show, right? They're saying, hey, the story we're telling you, and by the way, the story they're telling isn't he tried to kick her out and she wouldn't, so then he resorted to self-help and choked her. What they're saying is he didn't choke her. She flipped out and assaulted him, then claimed that he choked her after weeks of threatening to do something like that and refusing to move out, an infidelity of which we have proof. That's their claim. Not saying it's accurate. That's their claim. It's not that, oh, she had it coming or something like that. That would be ridiculous. I just want to really make sure we're parsing between stuff. Here's two things. One, video evidence of a private investigator of prior infidelity. I'm not trying to get into something that's kind of untoward. People's private stuff is between them. It's what they're saying is we've got corroborating evidence for his story. That's interesting. The other thing I would just note, because people tend to grab onto something and they want to go run with it. This is still a very it depends thing, okay? Yeah. Because a destroyed room, a scratched face, and hair ripped out would also be evidence of a domestic assault occurring. Scratches on faces are often defensive wounds. Not always, okay? Sometimes they're offensive wounds, right? Someone's freaking out and trying to slap at you, scratch you. But also, and I'm telling you both ways here. I'm not saying either way one of these things are true, but I've seen both. I've seen a situation, and I'm just going to go with the male-female thing because that's the alleged charges here, okay? That's the only reason I'm doing that. Apologies if I offend anyone. And again, apologies if this conversation is triggering for anyone. Domestic assault is a horrifying thing. And I'm sorry if you've ever had to go through that, sincerely. I've prosecuted cases where guys have had their faces scratched up by an assailant who was smaller and weaker than them. And that's the main thing they could do to hurt them. I've also had cases where a guy choked a woman until unconsciousness and his face was scratched up because she was trying to fight him off. That's something to be cautious about, okay? Defensive wounds are often found forearms and arms, right? Because, again, and this is what I do, so maybe it doesn't bother me as much as it should, but when you think about where you're grabbing someone, if you're being hurt, you're often going to see defensive wounds on the top side of hands and on forearms, face, and neck. So, in a destroyed room, again, could be evidence of domestic assault. Someone just commented the charge of choking means pictures, though. No, it doesn't. I'm sorry. That's not true. Respectfully, I appreciate what you're trying to add to the conversation. It doesn't necessarily. It means that it got alleged, and there might be some corroborating evidence. It might not. What they show in booking is what they believe they have PC for. That could just be based on the statement. We don't know anything. We don't know whether there's now they should have, just for purposes of, there should be pictures of the entire scene. There should be pictures of the alleged victim. There should be pictures of Xavier Worthy. And then everyone's just got to try to piece it together. But those pictures are almost certainly not going to become public. And for good reason. So here's what I would say. They are clearly telling one story. She, based on what we know right now, is telling another story. We don't know which is true. But just, I would caution these fans to not assume that he's guilty based on what we know, but I would also urge you not to exonerate him based on the idea, oh, well, parts of his hair were ripped out. That's a very common defensive wound as well. It's also a common assaultive wound in these particular types of situations. So honestly, I'm glad I'm not the prosecutor on this. I domestic assault occurs in the home. And no one was there, probably. I mean, we don't know, right? Odds are no one was there. And so you end up in a scenario where there's no way of knowing. And so a prosecutor is going to have to look at those pictures. They're going to have to look at the, I'm sure, extensive things that Worthy's attorneys are going to throw and whatever attorney she happens to procure. And then they have to decide what's true. And let me just tell you, those are gut-wrenching decisions. Man, I'm ending this on a depressing note. But I would just say those are gut-wrenching decisions, because what if you're wrong? What if you charge it and they did it? What if you charge it and they didn't do it? These are horrible decisions to have to make in a broken world. But I would just tell Chiefs fans, there's a story that's being told on one side, a story that's being told on the other side. I've seen versions of each. The whole thing is just super unfortunate. So yep. I would just let people know, based on that statement, don't run with that and say, oh no, see, his hair was pulled out, he's obviously innocent. That could mean he's innocent. It could mean she was fighting for her life. Could mean either. And I don't know anything about Worthy. I'm not trying to bury the guy. What is he, 22? Yeah. So I'm not saying he did it either. Just don't jump to one thing or the other based on something because you want to believe it.
And by the way, just as an aside, like for anyone who's wondering, the NFL, there does not need to be a guilty verdict for the NFL to take action with Worthy. Yep. Just in case anybody's wondering that, there have been plenty of times guys have been suspended without a guilty verdict. So, yep. obviously the most important thing is whether or not he's guilty, just in general. But from a football perspective on this, it's not as though the NFL has to wait for a ruling to come down. They don't. A lot of times they will wait. They don't have to. There's not the NFL is not law enforcement. They don't have to wait. They can take action when they deem fit.
All right. I think that we have fed this horse here on the breaking news team. Obviously, Hollywood Brown back in Kansas City. I think we covered all of it that we need to cover. So I appreciate everybody hanging out with us on a Saturday afternoon as the Kansas City Chiefs do re-sign Hollywood Brown to a one-year deal up to $11 million. Still don't have that full contract number yet. It's going to be interesting to see how the Chiefs approach now their free agency plan. The Mahomes restructure still has not happened yet as the time of recording this podcast, being live right now with you guys, still has not happened. We'll see. We'll be live anytime the Kansas City Chiefs make a move. Maybe I'll be in the shower. Maybe I'll be somewhere else, but we will be live.
That'll do numbers.
Buddy, I was in the shower 10 minutes before the show started.
No, I'm saying you just hold that camera up
in the shower, yeah.
Oh, hi. I didn't see you there.
I should do that. I think that would be great content. I think people would pay for it. If only there was a site where people could pay for stuff like that. Anyway, that's going to do it for the breaking news team. I'm Tucker Feichel. That's Ken Swanson, Matt Verderham, and Seth Kaiser. Thank you all for joining us here as we break down Hollywood Brown returning to the Kansas City Chiefs. We will be back in about an hour and a half when the Chiefs resign Justin Watson.
Oh,